But first, for the headlines. Yesterday, leaders of the Chinese Communist Party laid the groundwork for President Xi Jinping to serve an unprecedented third term, passing a historical resolution that lifts him up to the heights of two former Communist Party leaders, the first government leader Mao Zedong, and economic reformer Deng Xiaoping. What does this mean for the U.S.? And what does this mean for Taiwan, which China has set its sights on? With me now to talk about this and more is U.S. Representative Pat Fallon, who's a member of the House Armed Services Committee, House Oversight and Reform Committee, the Congressional Taiwan Caucus, and the Conservative Climate Caucus. He represents the 4th Congressional District of Texas. Congressman Fallon, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Joseph, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, we're glad to have you. First, the news that China is paving the way for President Xi to serve a third term. What's your reaction to that?
Well, it's obviously one of pause because we saw the same thing happen with Russia, with Putin. Obviously, the Chinese Communist government doesn't have any legitimacy. They rule by the barrel of a gun. But at least with power sharing, you don't have the one strong man, because that's always, criminal history's proven that's a rather dangerous cocktail. And it's not surprising. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, that kind of thing. But so now we're dealing with Xi Jinping and Putin for the foreseeable future.
Now, you have been particularly interested in Taiwan, what China is doing there. Do you think this has ramifications specifically for Taiwan?
No, I think absolutely. And I don't think anybody in Taiwan is resting easy, particularly after our pullout and evacuation, and really in a humiliating way under Joe Biden in Afghanistan. And we've been talking to our Taiwanese friends. And the fact of the matter is, Joseph, we filed legislation in our office, and I don't care who takes credit for it. Joe Biden can take it and run and call it the Biden doctrine because it's really good policy. And what we're after here is deterrence. We want to make sure, one thing the Chinese government doesn't want is they don't want a hot war with the United States, particularly right now. They're hoping for our malaise and our just eventual internal decline with our divisions. So what our legislation says is the United States, in no uncertain terms, guarantees the security of Taiwan. That would mean if China attacks, that's a hot war with the United States. That would also be an incredible deterrent. And Joe Biden can call it the Biden doctrine for all I care. But unfortunately, it's not moving under the Democratic leadership in the House.
Well, the U.S. is dealing on a lot of fronts with China, and one of those is the climate front. And as you know, a somewhat surprise announcement was made this week about a climate change agreement. And climate czar John Kerry was asked a question in those negotiations. I want to play this clip and then give you a chance to respond to this.
Sure.
How in the several months of meetings behind the scenes with China did you bring up some of those very contentious issues, such as the use of forced labor in Xinjiang for building solar panels? How did you address it, and how did you kind of overcome that in reaching this final?
Well, we're honest. We're honest about the differences, and we certainly know what they are, and we've articulated them, but that's not my lane here.
So what do you make of John Kerry's statement that concerns about forced labor, human rights abuses in China is, quote, not his lane when it comes to these climate conversations?
It's not his lane like he's a bowler or something. I mean, I think what John Kerry's lane is more of a sanctimonious, self-promoting, pseudo-intellectual, narcissistic elitist. That's his lane, and he seems to be pretty good at it. That's just ridiculous that they're going to just excuse. And this was the fear that I had in the election last year. And there was a lot of things that President Trump had done very effectively that I felt was going to be reversed if Joe Biden won, one of which is the Chinese policy. President Trump had really called them to task, and he wanted fair trade. We were getting that. He wanted we weren't talking about Taiwan and China's aggression under 4 years of President Trump, but we immediately started talking about it when Joe Biden took office. And they're going to ignore human rights abuses of the Chinese Communist government as if they're not the greatest threat we face. They are absolutely the greatest threat we face. Now, Russia is as well, but they'll talk to you about Russia, but they do not want to talk to you about the Chinese threat.
Now, Congressman Fallon, we talked at the beginning of the segment, we're talking about Taiwan. We know about the Uyghur situation, the human rights abuses there. We're also announcing this negotiation or these conclusions of negotiations between the U.S. and China on climate. Do these issues affect one another in the relationships between the countries and in the way we handle one because of what we're trying to do with the other issues?
Oh, there's no doubt. It's all interrelated. You see it with China. First of all, they can't accept any criticism whatsoever. You see it if there's an American athlete or celebrity that says something about China, they get canceled in China. I mean, like really canceled, like they're a non-person or an unperson, like under the Stalinist regime. And you see these, again, sanctimonious celebrities that will stand up for quote unquote injustice unless it costs them. Like LeBron James is a perfect example. He ignores China completely. And yeah, they're all interrelated. And that's why we need to be firm. China reacts from strength. They also react on weakness. They'll pounce on weakness and they'll back off from strength.
When it comes to the Biden administration's priority regarding China, when we're thinking about Taiwan, human rights abuses, climate change, what do you think the Biden administration is most concerned about?
That's a great question. Well, certainly, when you talk about climate change, and a lot of the environmentalists in the United States want us to, reduce our emissions, and really at the sake of the economy. And we can find a smarter way. That's why I'm a member of the Conservative Climate Caucus. But with China, the United States is not a planet, and that's the problem. If we reduce emissions, China and India and some other developing countries will just increase theirs. So it gets us nowhere from an environmental standpoint. We need everyone to agree, but we also can't do it at the expense of the economy, because quite frankly, there is a huge moral case to be made for fossil fuels, and we can get into that on another day, I'm sure.
Yeah. Now, Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby was asked a related question about whether he thinks China or climate change is a bigger threat to the country. I'm going to play that question, his response, and then give you a chance to respond.
You've heard the secretary talk about the climate as a real and existential national security threat, and it is, not just to the United States, but to countries all over the world. And we consider China as the number one pacing challenge for the department. Both are equally important. Both are challenges that the secretary wants the senior leadership at the Pentagon to be focused on.
What's your reaction to his response there?
First of all, you got to be kidding me, right? I mean, this is what I want the Pentagon to be concerned about. Well, first of all, let's go through threats. What are the greatest threats the United States faces right now? Clearly, China bet on world hegemony. That's the first thing. Islamic fundamentalist terrorism. That's another. An increasingly aggressive Russia would be one. How about a nuclear Iran, or an unstable North Korea, or a runaway federal spending that risks economic collapse? Those are all real threats to our country today and moving forward. Now, what I'd love the military to be focused on, I don't know, operating submarines and planes and Navy warships and fighting the cyber threats and operating drones and developing our space initiatives. And I don't know, shooting straight. I don't want them concerned about the weather.
I think you probably speak for a lot of people when you say that. The very beginning of the Biden administration with the Afghanistan withdrawal, which who knows may end up defining his presidency ultimately, there was this strong desire on the part of President Biden to just be out of Afghanistan at any cost. Do you think that posture that he had in Afghanistan affects how he thinks about Taiwan and potentially makes him hesitant to protect Taiwan or any other kind of free nation ally?
Well, Joseph, what frightens me is this. China has they feel an ironclad claim on Taiwan. Well, the fact of the matter is that the Chinese communists have never ruled in Taiwan, not since 1949. So it's been over 70 years. So they don't have any direct claim. That's ridiculous. Also, from a national security standpoint, economically, we're already dealing with a lot of supply chain issues. Well, what about semiconductors? Taiwan makes more semiconductors than any other nation they manufacture than any other nation on Earth. And China, I think, manufactures about 16%, and Taiwan's hovering around 60% by some reports. So they would have a chokehold if they took over Taiwan. Never mind the moral implications of 23 million free human beings being subjugated to communist totalitarian rule. So Joe Biden has to and must show strength, because then all that's going to do is feed. It's not going to satiate the appetite of the Chinese communists. They're going to look. They're already manufacturing islands in the South China Sea, and they're going to be looking towards, regional and then global domination.
Congressman Fallon, I want to switch gears with you in our couple remaining minutes here. President Biden has repeatedly claimed that his social spending plan would not raise taxes even 1 cent on anyone making less than $400,000 a year. New analysis from the Tax Policy Center, which is not a right-wing policy center, finds that the Build Back Better plan would raise taxes. What's your reaction to that? Is that going to affect what the Biden administration is trying to do here?
Well, Joseph, I'm not surprised at all. Joe Biden says a lot of things that, when examined further, are not true. So I don't know if he's just naive, he doesn't remember, or he's just trying to deceive us intentionally. But this is the things that are so bad. Now, they call it the Build Back Better plan, the 3Bs. My 3Bs would be more like the Biden-Bernie bankruptcy plan. What Americans need to know is what's in this bill. I don't even know how many pages it is now, because it was 1,700 pages, then it was 2,400 pages, then it's like 2,600 pages. It's around 2,500 page bill that they want the Rules Committee to consider within a few hours once they dropped it, which is, again, absurd. That's something also they said they wouldn't do, but they have. They've broken that promise as well. But let's look and dive deep into what's hidden in this bill. One of the most egregious provisions that really scared the dickens out of me was they want to hire 85,000, I said that right, 85,000 new IRS agents. They want to pry into any American's bank account if you have more than $10,000 worth of activity. Now, that's not one transaction. That's in aggregate over a year. So that's about $28 a day. Most Americans have that kind of bank activity. 85,000 is bigger than Scranton, Pennsylvania, where Joe Biden's from. That's like, we just had Veterans Day yesterday. Joseph, that's 5 divisions of IRS workers. They want to increase their budget from 12 billion to 80 billion. This isn't 2021. This is 1984.
Congressman Fallon, unfortunately, I have to cut you off because we are out of time. There is so much more to get to, and we look forward to getting to it with you next time. But thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, Joseph. Take care. Have a great weekend. God bless.